Hello. So I am going to do a Halloween project, a Halloween costume. I am going to make an Eevee Pokemon costume for my toddler. Why I am documenting this project is because I think I am going to be using faux fur for the first time, and I know that that is tricky, and it is not the same as normal fabric, and you have to treat it very special because it can be finicky in different ways, and I'm going to learn about that. So let's dive into this project and see how it goes. Alright, so here's my plan for materials. I think that for the body, for the base, I'm just gonna have my kid wear like a jumpsuit, like a sweatsuit or like pajamas, you know, some base that's a solid color. I'll just get the brown ones for her to wear. And then for the tail and the collar bit, I think I want to try and use faux fur for the first time. I'm going to make those actually fuzzy. And then I think I'm going to just do a headband and ears on top of the headband instead of trying to do a beanie or something, because I've tried to do that before and for some reason I struggle with it. So maybe a headband and then put ears on. I don't think I'm going to do fur up here. Maybe just use fabric or felt or something. And so I'm going to have to match 3 different materials, especially for the brown is what I'm worried about, because I'll need to match whatever material I use up here to whatever material I use here to whatever material she is wearing. I'm gonna find 3 shades of brown that are the same color, because that picture makes them look a little different, but they are the same color. So I'm gonna have to do that and hope I can find 3 things that are all the same color. I went online and was able to find some great brown pajamas that would work great for the base of what she would wear. And then I went to some fabric stores trying to look for brown faux fur and hit a snag. I could not find any that were anywhere near the right shade, and especially that would match her outfit. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. Alright, so I am dyeing fabric for the first time. Well, poly stuff for the first time. I dyed natural fabric once and that was pretty straightforward and simple. This time it has to be on the stovetop because it has to be boiling. I just added the dyes that are for poly fabric. I think I'm just waiting for it to boil right now, but I think I am able to add the fabric. It's this fur for the Eevee costume that I'm going to be dyeing, and it has to be pre-wet. Yep. I just got it wet, and let's see what happens. I hope this works. Ooh, man, it's supposed to be on here for 45 minutes. I feel like I'd take it out right now. Holy cow. And I hope this is the right color. We'll find out. It looks a little bit red on my end because I'm making up a color. It's supposed to be brown, but the brown I bought looked really yellow. So I got some red too. Now I'm worried I added too much red. Okay, I know I added too much dye. I knew that, but I didn't really think about the consequences of that. This is so dark. It's been in there for 10 minutes. I'm gonna take it out right now because here's what I'm trying to match it to. I might have to try this again with some new fabric. I think I ruined this. So here's how that went. I went to go start dumping it out, and the fabric that started showing up on top of the water, yeah, it had not dyed. Like, it wasn't white anymore, but it clearly was not brown. It hadn't taken the dye yet. Interesting. The base had, but the fur had not. Like, the fabric had, but not the hair part. So I dumped out like 2/3 of the water and then just filled it up again with just normal water. And so there should be a lot less dye in there. And I'm hoping that because of that, it won't be so dark in the end. I'll turn the heat back up. Anyway, that's where we're at now. A lot less color. Discovered you can't take it out early. Yeah, we'll just let this stew and see how it goes. All right, it's been about 35-ish minutes since this whole thing has been going on. It was at a rolling boil for maybe 20, 25 minutes. I'm going to go ahead and finish it up now. I think I'm supposed to drain it and then rinse the fabric, lightly wash it, take it out. Anyway, stuff like that. So I'm gonna go ahead and do that. Okay, I rinsed this fabric out over a dozen times just like this, and it didn't matter how many times it was, there was some red dye that kept coming out of it,
every single time. It never seemed to get rid of all of the red dye. It just kept coming out again and again after every single rinse. I don't know if that's normal or not, but it seemed peculiar to me. Okay, this is just so weird how this fur took the dye. So the dye that I used was a combination of a brown that was a little bit yellowy mixed with a tiny bit of red, hopefully to kind of counterbalance that. Well, okay, so the base that it keeps it all together, whatever this is made out of, absorbed everything. That's nearly black. And then like the inside of the fur absorbed like nothing but the brown, but then the tips absorbed nothing but the red. This is totally unusable. Anyway, it created a pretty interesting effect that I doubt I will ever find any costume that will ever need this multicolored fur. But that's what happened. I mean, I know I didn't do a perfect dye job and I probably didn't use all of the products exactly perfectly, but this is just so strange how it took it, how the base took the yellow brown and then the ends took all the red. So weird.
All right, so some decisions have to be made because I don't think my current plan of action is going to work out. I don't think there's any way I am going to get all three of those brown parts, the main outfit, the felt or fabric for the ears, and the fur, brown fur, to all match each other because I could not find any brown fur in stores that I liked, and obviously I cannot dye it to make it right. I'm not going to continue trying to do that. And so I think what I'm going to do, I am going to make her into a shiny Eevee. And if you don't know anything about Pokemon, that is just a special version of the Pokemon. They're more unique and they look different and they have different color schemes. And a shiny Eevee is all like a cream color and white. And I think I can pull that off. I think because cream colors, I have a lot of faith that I will be able to find the right cream colors in all those different places that can match and work together. So we're gonna try making her a shiny Eevee instead.
Now, on to construction, starting with the ears. So one reason I actually wanted to do a headband instead of a hat or something is because she already had this one with ears already on it, and I thought that that would make a really good foundation to begin with. There were many layers involved in making these ears, and one of the most foundational ones in the middle was I used some felt that was sticky on the back, and I cut out the shape twice and stuck them to each other with one of the ears from the headband sandwiched in the middle of them. And then I went ahead and cut out the cream color that I needed for the main part of the ear. And a lot of this I was making up as I went. At first, I was planning on making it bigger and then rolling it over on all the edges to create the part that you can see on the front, but realized pretty quickly that that actually wasn't going to work. It was going to create quite a bit of bulk and it simply wouldn't work with the shape at the top of the ear. So I had to come up with another solution. And then assembly began. I started with sticking the foundational white parts onto the ears. And what I did to make sure that those lined up was I took off the sticky part at the top first, stuck those together so that the bottom part wouldn't be sticky yet and I would be able to line it up with the ear exactly as I wanted it to. So I finally decided that instead of rolling the edges over so that the cream would be on the front, I was just going to cut out a whole nother piece and put it on the front, and then I would just glue it or stick it around the edges to make those nice and crisp. And so in the end there would just be two pieces of cream instead of just the one being rolled over. And of course I cut it out wrong the first time and didn't leave enough for the pointy little end, so I had to do it a second time. Now, how I decided to hold almost all of this together was by using sheets of sticky paper. As you can see here, I'm not sure exactly what it's called, but it's just big sheets that you peel off of the paper and they are sticky on both sides. And I laid that out on all this material, and that's what primarily held all of this together.
All right, so I have just nearly finished the ears. Last thing to do, I think, is to put the fabric on the band to cover that up, the felt or whatever. I'm actually pretty happy with how they turned out. It took me longer than I expected. I haven't looked at the clock, but it's taken me many hours. I'm wondering if this project is bigger than I was expecting. New goal, get it done by tomorrow, because I haven't even started working with the fur yet, which is going to be a whole new beast. But anyway, I'm very happy with how this turned out. Most of it was felt and double-sided sticky paper, and I used the last of it that I had, so hopefully I didn't make any mistakes or have to do it again. But yay! These are mostly done. All right, so I made some little pieces to kind of try and find a shape for what to do. Oh no, don't pull them off. This is just to kind of figure out what I'm gonna do. This will probably be the base. But yeah, I think that's pretty good. They might need to be a little wider. They might be a little too pointy, but okay. That might be what I attach the fur to. Yeah, so okay. Starting to find the general shape.
Alright, so here's how I'm planning on sewing this base all together, but I know that I want the top layer, the fur layer, to have a little more fabric than this under layer so that it will poof up and out, I hope. So I'm going to take these and pull them out a little bit. I've traced the inside neck area, but then if I pull these out, then I'll have a little extra fabric on the fur, and so I'll trace this shape now to hopefully have a little bit more fabric on the outside so it'll poof out and up instead of poofing down. And I haven't quite figured out yet how I want to connect all these exactly because I know it does need to open up so her head can get in. But for now I'm going to make these as two pieces, one big one and then the back piece, and I'll figure out how to attach them all together later.
So I feel very silly. I just made a mistake that I knew was something that I haven't had to really think about before since I've never used faux fur. But you know how it has a fall, it has a grain where the fur is going in one direction. You want to think about with your pattern which way you want the fur to fall, right? So I just did all this, put the pattern what I thought I wanted, not thinking about how this is faux fur. I've never worked with it before. The fur, as you can see, is going this way. Well, this is the front. I want it to be going this way, so I did it upside down. And I also realized that I want each of the petals for the fur to fall with it. So I will have to make this 4 separate pieces because you have to go with the lay or the grain of the fur. So let's try this again.
So one of the biggest and most consistent tips that I saw online is when you cut the fabric, you do not want to cut through the entire thing. You only want to cut through the base fabric that all the fur is attached to. You want to be careful about that because you don't want to go cutting all of the fur because that would really mess up the look of it and it will have chopped all of the hair off. But this way, you still have the fur hanging off the edge and it is undisturbed and beautiful. And it was amazing to do it this way because it made it so there was hardly any mess. Everywhere that I had looked online said be prepared for a big mess to clean up. But because you do this, I did it this way and didn't cut through any of the hair, I had very little cleanup to do at the end. It hardly made any mess.
Alright, so here's my game plan. I kind of eyeballed this, but on all of them, I kept the sides the same up here so that they will all sew together correctly at the neckline. But then all around the edge, I added about a quarter of an inch, which then fades into about a half an inch, maybe even a little bit more on the tips, so that when I stuff it, there will be room for it to expand. And I think the way I cut it will make the most sense. Putting it down here, hoping that means the middle will puff up more than the sides. Anyway, so this is what it looks like before the stuffing, and we'll see how it looks after the stuffing. Okay, so I've been trying to figure out how to get this on and off of her, and because it has to open up somehow, I thought for a little while trying to use elastics somehow, like connecting these with elastics so it can go over her head, but I don't think that would be effective enough. I don't think I could sew it so it would get big enough. And so what I think I'm going to do is I am just going to sew all of these together, and then to put it on her, there will be hooks and eyes over here. And then we can just slip it on and then close it up with hooks and eyes.
And then I know a little trick that is smart to do is to move all the fur away from where you are going to be sewing it together. So that way the fur doesn't get stuck inside the seam because then it looks kind of funky once it is sewn together and opened up again. So you want to move the fur out of the way from where you're sewing. And then I saw another tip online that said to use clips instead of pins because sometimes pins can get lost in the fur and it can be kind of hard to handle that thick amount of fabric. So clips are smarter. And then I decided it would be smart to do an understitch. And I'm honestly not sure if that was necessary, but it made sense in my head because I did not want this underlayer poking up around her neck. I wanted it to be the fur all the way up. And so I did this as a precaution. I don't know if it made a difference or not, but I felt good about doing it.
All right, so now I am starting to make some big decisions. This is the finishing stuff, and so I actually need to think through it and make sure it's right. So these bits are going to get flipped over, and that is where the stuffing will be. And so here's what has been in my head the whole time. This is what I had been figuring I would do, is I would get this far, I would stuff it, and then the entire bottom would just be hot glued. I wasn't going to sew it. This was all just going to be hot glued down, and that's how that would be. I would stuff it first and then close it up. Now, if I still go that route, I actually think what I might do, because I was just going to treat it as one big thing, I might tack this down on each of these seams, tack it down so that there is some structure and some sort of pocket that I will then stuff, and then I will hot glue down like each petal, but those will be tacked down first. There very well might be a better way to do this, but this is what I'm going to do. Okay, so now I think I'm going to sew by machine. Yeah, I bet I can move that fur out of the way well enough. Sew by machine, tack it down right here on each one. Then I'm going to go ahead and get the stuffing, I think, and my hot glue gun. And will it be done? I think I just will need the hooks and eyes on the ends. Ooh, that's exciting. Okay, let's see how this goes.
And that is exactly what I did. I put all the stuffing in there and had it poofing up while I hot glued it down, and I'm not sure if that was a better way to do it. I could have probably just made a pocket and then put the stuffing inside after, but this way actually worked really well to see exactly what the volume would be and to close it up around it. And so I'm glad with how that turned out, and I loved the results.
All right, now I am hopping over to work on the tail because I think I have the collar done, besides the hooks and eyes. But besides hooks and eyes, I'm very happy with how that turned out. Now for the tail, I don't have a pattern for this. I'm honestly not quite sure how to search for a pattern for this tail, and I honestly think that the amount of time it would take me to go and find a pattern that I actually liked and then adapt it to my needs, blah blah blah, I could just figure it out. So I'm gonna start cutting out some pieces, just start playing around with shapes, seeing if I can get a tail shape, and then go from there.
I was about to just go start chopping into my fabric, making some shapes that I think might make a tail, but I think I actually am gonna either draw them or cut them out on paper first, and then do the fabrics there for. So if I like what I did or didn't like what I did, I can actually go back and reference something and alter that. Not bad, but I can do better.
And better I did, by using 4 panels instead of 2.
All right, so this is where I am, and I am actually quite happy that I actually got a shape. It wasn't just like a cylinder. Little bit of tweaks here and there need to be done, but I am very happy of myself that I was able to get, like, yeah, just not a cylinder, that I actually was able to sculpt it a little bit.
So the tail is actually 2 colors. It's cream for the majority of it, but then the tip is white. And so I had to use 2 different colors of fur, and unlike the collar, which had them just going side by side and the grain wasn't very different, these are going right on top of each other, and so I had to force this fur down as much as I can so that when I lay the white on top of it to sew together, that fur will be out of the way. And this is where the clips really came in handy. But it was so worth it because once I open it up and massage it all back into place, it looks so good. All of the places that I researched online recommended doing an overlock stitch on the edges. You don't want to just do a straight stitch or anything because over time fur will find its way to poke out, and it's just not the strongest thing to keep that sort of material held together, and so doing a strong overlock stitch is what is recommended. I was so happy with how this turned out. One of the things I was scared with the design is that it was a little too slender and slim, but the fur makes it poof out and it looks just like an Eevee tail. I love it. Now back to the ears. You'll notice that I used 2 headbands, and the reason for that is because I needed the blue one because that one had the foundation for the ears that I needed, but it was a little bit flimsy-ish, and my daughter is notorious for breaking headbands, and so I wanted to reinforce it with a second one, and the second one is stronger and also wider, and so I thought it might help hold that weight and hold it on her head better, and so that is why there are 2 headbands. To cover the headband, I just used 1 large piece of felt with some slits in it to be able to slide around the ears to try to make it look as seamless as possible. I did have the problem of excess material because you are rounding it, and so there's a little too much there. So I did go in and take out little darts to reduce that bulk so it would be able to round to the shape of the headband. And for anyone curious, Gorilla Glue is very effective. It dries pretty darn quickly and is very strong. And I got quite a bit on my fingers, and that stayed on for a while and didn't come off, and the stuff on my nails especially is staying on forever. But it held it together really good. One bummer thing about this headband is that the silhouette is not quite right. The ears should be a little bit farther apart, and then there's a pretty clear little tuft of hair on top of Eevee's head that's pretty iconic for that Pokemon. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get that because I chose to use this blue headband as a base and the ears were too close. So unfortunately, it doesn't have that iconic little tuft of hair in the middle, but is what it is.
All right, I am basically done. So here's the headband. It is all put together, all done. I'm not doing anything else to it. I got the felt put on around the edge. I glued it right on the back edge. So hopefully, I was thinking that nothing would be up against her head. That would be weird. It would be nice, flat, smooth felt, well, flat-ish. I had to take little scores out, or whatever they're called, to make it fit this round surface, and a couple on this side as well. But it hides everything pretty darn well. At least the front looks good, and that's what matters. I had to super glue, you know, with some Gorilla Glue a couple places because they were kind of flaking off just because they only had the sheets. And I did try this headband on her, and it does stay. It doesn't flop, it doesn't move, and it's on pretty snug, and she ran around like it wasn't uncomfortable. So great. The tail is all good to go. So I actually had to do something. The tan fur is actually a little bit longer than the white fur, and so what I did was where it meets, it was pretty apparent that it was longer than that. It was flaring up quite a bit higher, so I went in and trimmed. I tried to do it fairly gradient so you couldn't tell that I had cut the fur, and I think I did a pretty good job. Sorry, that was blurry. Yeah, so the tail is good to go. The only thing left for the tail, the last thing to do, is just to close this up. And I think I have some ideas of how to do that, so it'll be good. It won't look good, I don't think, but it'll be in a position to where I can tack it onto her, I think. And I'm hoping to tack this in 2 places so it will stick up, because if I only do it in one, obviously it'll just be laying flat, and Eevee's tail is like straight out or up. So I'm gonna tack it, I think, right where that is, but I'm also hoping to put like a safety pin here and tack it. I don't think just tacking it on her top will be enough, so I'm thinking of maybe putting some like band around her waist. I don't know what I'll actually use. I don't know if it'll be this, but just some really strong band that'll go around her middle, probably under her shirt, that I can then safety pin this too, so it'll be safety pinned in 2 places and hopefully have a little bit more of an upward angle, hopefully. And the last thing is the collar. Everything is done except for the hook and eyes, which I should just do that. In my head, I'm like, that'll be easy. I can throw that on in a moment and it'll be done. So I haven't done it, but I need to do that. So anyway, collar is done except for that. So everything, I'm in such a good place where I'm like, this is good to go, even though I do have those few things left. But yeah, this is basically done.
So my plan had been to sew it to the pants somewhere, and then once it was on together, I would pin it up under something that would be strong. I thought it would have to be a belt or something, but this would have been just fine. But after trying it on her, I realized the best thing to do would probably sew it to the back of the sweater, which falls down to like here, and then I can just pin it to this maybe underneath, because this is pretty sturdy and I can draw it to be even stronger. And the elastic is so tight, I think that would be just fine. Or holding it on her, at least having it here and it just flopping down didn't look too bad. So for now, I'm going to sew it onto here, and then night of, I'll decide if it needs more volume or not, but I'm going to sew it on there to get that done.
So it is Halloween. It is the day of, and I have got everything done for her Eevee costume. So the couple of last things that I needed to tie up, I have now done those. I have the hooks and eyes put onto the collar. I have 2 of them just to keep it more secure and make sure it stays, you know, even and flat. And I've tried it on, it works pretty good. They're at a good distance to where it keeps it together really well. Now, I am glad, I've never done hooks and eyes on something like this before, and something I am glad
happened is once they are connected, I didn't know how far of a distance to do it, what would be the best, and so I just kind of decided on where to put it, and I did it. These are right on the edge, and then the eyes or whatever are a little bit farther in. And let's see, this is the back. I'm glad I did them on those sides, because if you lift it up from the back, there's a gap that is pretty apparent, but if you lift it up from the front, that doesn't appear. And so luckily, with it being on her shoulders, that won't be a problem, because if it was lifting up from this side, you'd be able to see it. But luckily, that won't be an issue, and so that turned out great. I've tried it on her. It's a great size. It's comfy. So that is done. And then the other thing that needed to be addressed was the tail being attached to her outfit. So at first I thought I was going to put it on the pants, then I realized that didn't make sense because the shirt falls over the pants. So it is on the shirt, or the top. I sewed it on just above this lower band. I sewed it on, and then I had so many variations of what else I was going to do, but here's what I landed on. Okay, so I got a large safety pin, and because I realized it needed to be tacked on in more than one place, and it needed a little bit more anchorage, because I had her try it on just with the sewing and it flopped straight down and it was dumb. And so I have anchored it twice now where it is sewn and where that large safety pin is. And then what I did, she tried it on, and I put another safety pin right above it, and I hooked that on her sweater onto the elastic on her pants underneath, because just the sweater, this is pretty big, it's just going to sag and sag and sag. There's no anchor. So I pinned this to her pants underneath once it was on her, and it actually did keep it straight out. Unfortunately, it doesn't go up at all, but it at least does go straight out, and it's not just hanging straight down. So that worked pretty well as I could hope. Also, this tail, I did hairspray it a little bit, and I knew the hairspray wasn't going to stay. It wasn't going to keep it exactly sculpted as I put it on, but it at least helps the hair know what direction it should be going. So even if it does get frazzled, it will want to lay in that direction a little more naturally than it would have otherwise. So yeah. So this is all done, and we will see it on her tonight. She turned out adorable. Everyone thought she was so cute, even though they didn't know what she was. Unfortunately, the headband didn't stay on much of the night, but that's okay. She was still so cute.